To turn this over to Jack Posobiec here, but I got callers that have been holding a while. He said he doesn't mind taking your calls. He'd like to hear from him, but he'll ride shotgun along with us as we take these few final calls, and he takes over with his agenda. Jack Posobiec, the Patriot, about to get married. Congratulations on that. Working some with InfoWars. And, of course, one of the key Trump boosters throughout the campaign, the guy the president likes to tweet and that the media's demonized. They said, you can't be a naval intelligence and have the president like you. I mean, you know, that's but it's okay to, you know, be like Hillary with Uranium One. We've got a report out that a lot of experts are saying, Gorka is saying, that Hillary would be executed in 1950s for what she's done with Uranium One.
Yeah, what he's basically saying is how much times have changed since the 1950s and how much we really used to take seriously the threat of foreign influence in our country, the actual possible collusion, communist takeovers that was going on. You got to go back 1950s. This was the height of the Cold War. This was when we were really looking for people like that. TV show The Americans is all about this kind of stuff that happened back in the 80s, but it gets into that idea of what was going on during the Cold War. Back then, the United States had a very strong presence against high crimes and misdemeanors of our country. They actually went after people. They interviewed people in front of Congress. When's the last time she's been dragged in front of anybody or anyone has even suggested that any charges be brought against her in this situation? And then Hollywood
complains and freaks out and makes hundreds of movies about so-called abuses during the Red Scare, when it's all turned out to basically been bona fide and real. The response probably wasn't strong enough. The problem is that they would divert it down to low-level people instead of burning the high-level folks. And it was also used to consolidate some right-wing power, which I don't agree with. But still, everything they claimed about the Red Scare, they're now doing in triplicate, calling for me and Drudge and to be shut down, calling for the president to be charged with treason. And it's all been proven to be a hoax. And what they say we did, they've been proven to have done.
Yeah, no, I've been caught up in that as well. They'll come after me because my last name is Polish and say, oh, well, this guy's Polish, and so look at him, he must be some kind of Russian agent. Meanwhile, that just shows the ignorance of them in the region. If they understood anything about the history between Russia and Poland, I think they'd be actually quite surprised to find that no Pole would ever go and work with the Russians. Now, Alex, what it is we're in a microcosm of that same type of Red Scare that happened during the 1950s, where we're trying to point out the true stuff that's going on. They just want to lie about these little things. Donald Trump Jr. meeting with a lawyer to talk about Russian adoptions or all these little things. Meanwhile, there's this giant pile of evidence that's piling up, and maybe it turned out to be a pile of uranium, and it looks at this point that they're completely overlooking. They'll like publish one article on it and say, yeah,
and
we
this is the most strategic espionage you could do. This is the worst thing you can do, is give up your strategic stockpile of fissile material.
Yeah, we're not, and that's the part of it that blows my mind that hasn't been brought up more. We're not talking about her selling, 20% of the U.S., I don't know, stock in some innocuous substance here. This is specifically nuclear material. We're talking about actual nuclear material being sold to the Russians. And that is why that it had to go to the Sofio process in the first place, that it had to be reviewed, the sale to a Russian company, because anything else wouldn't be considered a strategic asset of the United States. In this case, the Uranium One was considered, and we're breaking down some of the articles I pulled up. What you're looking at here is actually Bureau of Land Management. So BLM out there in Oregon is specifically talking about their work on federal lands to dig this stuff up. And this is the digging that I've been doing this week about their digging, in a sense, on Uranium One, to find that all that stuff, Alex, you remember that was going on in Malheur County, Oregon, all of that is backed by Uranium One. They took the land from ranchers, they took the land from the federal government, and what they're doing is they've sold it to the highest bidder, which in this case was Vladimir Putin. That's the Bureau of Land Management website. That is a public federal government
And no wonder
website.
It was bribery, and they ordered the investigation shut down, and then Mueller's getting money from it, and 10 separate companies where he doesn't even have to put money in it to get money out of the brokerage firms. I mean, no wonder he's so desperate. He needs to be in serious trouble.
Right, so that's why I spent all day yesterday having people who follow me call in to Senator Grassley's office and demand that there be an independent investigation started specifically on Uranium One to counter what Robert Mueller is doing. Because as we've seen, there's so many members of Congress that are tied to this through their financial actions. And Senator Wyden out in Oregon, I'd be very interested to see how all this was going on in his own, literally his own backyard, without him knowing about it.
Well, you're going to be breaking all this down. You're going to be breaking all this down. I'm going to turn this over to you, my friend. And it's great to have you here co-hosting with us. But let me just say this. Orrin Hatch is announcing his retirement. I mean, they're all leaving. It's all, they are collapsing. They are in a sick mess, but the deep state's still trying to sabotage the president. What do you make of him holding back those final files? I think he's using that as leverage.
From what I heard is that this is a situation where he was told very specifically that, and CIA has done this a number of times, so is ODNI, the Office of Director of National Intelligence. They've said that if you don't do what we say, that we'll stop giving you briefings, or we'll cut off your funds, or we'll cut off your access to information, and we won't be, we'll go forward and tell people in the press that you're not getting your intel. So I think they use this as a power play to try to discredit the president and try to make him look like he was reneging on a promise.
They did, but what's come out so far, we're going over it, is very damning.
No, it's come out so far. Talk about false flag operations, talk about terrorism plans that the CIA was trying to run inside the United States that they were going to plant on other people. And this is plans going all the way back to the 1960s. So you talk about what was going on back then, and we're supposedly told that it's all been cleaned up since now. But why would
and by the way, we're going to have special broadcasts this weekend covering all this. I've got huge intel I'm not ready to drop yet, not just on this, but it's all incredible. Jack Posobiec's taken over. Give those 3 callers that were still holding a free T-shirt. Okay, and I apologize to them. I really appreciate him holding so long. I can't get to him. I got to let Posobiec host. He's got a lot of great intel for us. We'll be back with Jack Posobiec on the other side. I'm Alex Jones. Please spread the word. We're in an info war.
Jack Posobiec coming in here, 4th hour, Alex Jones Show. I want to thank Alex so much for having me on today, and I appreciate it. Honestly, an hour, I don't know if that's going to be enough to break down all of the news and the intel that I have to share. I broke this down a little bit on my personal Twitter page, my Periscope. If you guys have seen that earlier this week, I teased out a little bit of what's going on, but there's so much coming out in the Uranium One investigation. There's so much that's happening, honestly, on a day-to-day basis, things that I got from sources just last night, people that I've talked to this morning. It's changing on a day-to-day basis because the people that were behind that entire scheme, that entire situation, are trying to jump through hoops and move one step ahead of the investigation, one step ahead of the media, and one step of those of us in alternative media that are breaking down what exactly is going on and what exactly happened with that conflagration. But the Uranium One story will not go away, and in fact, the investigation is getting bigger and bigger. Just this morning, it was confirmed that President Trump himself is the one that gave the order for the FBI informant to be allowed to testify before Congress. So we had that reported from sources before. Now it's confirmed that the President of the United States, President Trump, and I don't think you'd find any other president that would allow this, he went to the DOJ and said, lift the gag order on this informant. So there's a confidential informant, someone that we had that was on, essentially on the payroll or intimately knew the details of the Uranium One deal, where there's considerations that he may have actually gone to Russia and been part of this and turned over documents. He's been trying to get this out to congressional investigators for years, but the Obama DOJ wouldn't let him. President Trump himself has now said that this confidential informant should come out. But here's what's breaking news is that now what my sources are telling me is that Senator Chuck Grassley and the other Democrats on the committee, on the Judiciary Committee, are at odds as to how the informant's testimony should come out in the Senate, in the committee. And they're currently split on it because it's split down party lines. The Republicans are saying, we want this to be as open and transparent as possible. The Democrats are saying that it shouldn't happen. There's so much infighting. The Democrats are trying to do everything they can to stall this. And the latest that I've heard on this is that they're even discussing having separate hearings for the informant, one for the Republicans and one for the Democrats. So, folks, it doesn't take a genius to explain what's going to happen if they do something like that. What's going to happen is the Republicans are going to come out and say, oh, well, he said this. And then the Democrats are going to come out and say, no, you're wrong. He told us this. And therefore, if the two stories don't match up, he's discredited. This is something you do. Instead of playing one side against the other, they're playing their investigation off of another investigation. It's actually parallel investigation to have one informant give testimony to two separate sets of investigators, in this case being the United States Senate Judiciary Committee. So That is an absolute travesty of justice. There should be no call for a separate hearing of this informant. There wasn't separate hearings when Roger Stone went and testified to the Intel Committee. There wasn't a separate hearing when Donald Trump Jr. went and testified. Why would there be partisan hearings? Because they're injecting partisanship into the process. And once they do that, they can simply run around like Hillary Clinton used to do and say it's a vast right-wing conspiracy and try to discredit this. Because Uranium One, as it really stands, and I'm going to be breaking down some background on Uranium One that in the next segment here. This is the scandal that is going to take down so many senators. It is going to take down so many people in deep state because Robert Mueller, we've now found out, was aware of all of this. Now, another example is Rod Rosenstein. If there was a confidential informant, right? Who was running the informant? Well, now we find that the informant was working for Rod Rosenstein, who was running the investigation. So if he was running him, why then, and Senator Grassley even brought this up and said, why was Rosenstein not forthwith with the fact that he had an informant on the payroll of Uranium One, or at least on the payroll of someone involved with the deal, that knew all about what was going on, whereas Rosenstein himself hasn't mentioned a single thing to the congressional investigators or to the Senate about this, despite being questioned about it numerous times. This is a clear obstruction on the part of Rosenstein and a clear example potentially of him trying to protect his good old friend that he hired to run the Russia investigation, none other than Mr. Robert Mueller. Ladies and gentlemen, you're not going to hear this type of information in the lying mainstream media, to borrow a phrase. You're not going to hear this type of information on other platforms. That is why we ask you to stick it here with InfoWars, because we can bring the questions together to do things that journalists used to do, and that's ask hard questions, to connect dots, and to do investigation into these matters, instead of simply parroting talking points and government press releases whenever they're sent out to us. I'm Jack Posobiec. I'm going to be here. We've got 30 minutes to go. I'm going to cover some more stuff. But in the next segment, what I'm going to do is talk about specifically, if they sold 20% of the uranium, where did the uranium come from? And where did the uranium go? Stay tuned. Popping in for Alex Jones today, it's Jack Posobiec here from Washington, D.C., breaking down all the latest of what's going on here in the city that has been rocked over the past few weeks with the revelations of Hillary Clinton's involvement in the Uranium One deal and the fact that the entire situation was under investigation by the FBI, but was then since swept under the rug by none other than FBI directors Robert Mueller and James Comey. Mueller, of course, is now the special prosecutor in charge of the Russia investigation, the Russia collusion investigation on President Trump, whereas James Comey was fired. However, it really does beg the question, now that the new evidence has come out that Mueller may have been involved in covering up the previous administrations, Barack Obama administration's dealings with Russia, the sale of Uranium One to Russia, the contracting of these lands being approved through the Department of State, Hillary Clinton, while the Secretary of State's husband, Bill Clinton, accepted $500,000 from the Russian state, as well as $145 million in donations to the Clinton Foundation. One piece of this that I'd like to go back to, and I brought up some of this with Alex earlier today, is that all of this uranium that we keep talking about, the 20% of the U.S. uranium, well, where is that uranium, you ask? Where is it? Can we find it? Can we see it? Can we touch it? What happened to it? Is it really gone? Is it all in Russia? How do we know? So if you go back and look, there's actually a Bureau of Land Management website that I did some digging and actually pulled this up, that wrote back all the way in 2011 and 2012 that they were indeed looking to secure a deal and approve a deal with Uranium One through their shell company, Oregon Energy LLC, to approve this deal to allow the development of a strip mine or possibly even an open pit mine in Oregon. The company was later sold, and they're now subsidiaries, right? They call it, that's what Uranium One does, is that they use all these subsidiaries to make it look like it's an Australian company, or make it look like it's a US company or a Canadian company. But what happens is they're really all owned at the end of the day by Uranium One, which is in turn owned by the Russian state. The way it works is those mines, a lot of them, or a lot of the land usage rights, are actually down in Malheur County in southwest Oregon. This part of Oregon gained a lot of international attention back all the way in 2014, 2015, when the standoffs were going on between the Bundys and the Hammond Ranch. The Bundy Ranch is there as well, northern Nevada, southern Oregon, that were going on when they were trying to get kicked off of their land by the US government, as they alleged. The standoff happened, and those ranchers were the ones that were standing in the way while BLM was trying and pushing very hard to get them off their lands. FBI's HRT was involved, and now we're breaking down and learning that this project is actually called the Aurora Project. Now, I know that is kind of a headline-grabbing title, but it's actually because it's near the town of Aurora. So this Aurora Project quite simply says the Aurora Uranium Project shows the local infrastructure. There's been previous mines have been out there. They've known that uranium has been there since the 1970s. It's only been in recent years that it was sold out to Russia. So it used to be that these were done by US companies or done by Canadian companies, our allies, but then it was through the sale of those companies that Russia, and the approval of that sale by the Clinton as Secretary of State and then Obama as president, those sales put these uranium deposits, which are found here in the United States, in the hands of the Russians. We now know, and I got off the phone with a source just before the call today, that what they're doing is the uranium that comes out of there, according to my source, is sent up to Canada, which has different import-export licensing than if they were sending it directly to Russia. So it goes to Canada, so it's sort of, and then it goes to Russia from there. So what they're kind of doing is almost laundering the uranium in the way that you would launder money, because if it was being sent directly from the United States to Russia, this would obviously trigger a lot of alarm bells. So what they're doing with Uranium One, which was originally part Canadian-owned company, now they're able to funnel it through Canada, then get it back to Russia. Here's another shot you guys can see of what's going on there. This is one of the major open pit mine. It's a diagram for what they wanted, for everything they want to do there. The stockpile areas, the processing plants, all of this, Malheur County, very close to where that standoff took place. So now this really begs the question that if this huge project is going on out there in southwestern Oregon, Aurora, Oregon is the name of the city, so they call it the Aurora Project. Here I am on a Friday talking about Project Aurora. I didn't think that would be coming up. But if all of this is going on, clearly the local representatives would know something about it. The federal representatives for Oregon, to include Senator Ron Wyden, certainly would know something about it. We're now seeing, you can see the data, total production of uranium concentrated in the United States going all the way down. These are in pounds, so millions and millions of pounds of uranium coming out of the United States. I think these numbers go through about 2011, so right around the time this was going on. This is one of the major uranium spots in not only in the United States, but in the entire world. And what we're learning that Russia was up to with its Uranium One purchases was to corner the entire, not just US market on uranium, but actually the world market on uranium, a strategic nuclear material, strategic fissile material that's used in nuclear weapons. Now, Russia, of course, we know, has a somewhat cozy relationship with North Korea. Is it possible then, it's not so far to say, that some of that yellow cake, and that's the type of uranium that you can get out of Oregon, is it possible that some of that uranium ended up in the hands of the North Koreans, who we now know have a reinvigorated nuclear program, and they have the ability, or they're trying to get the ability with their TD2 missiles, to be able to launch into sites in northwestern the United States. So I was discussing this earlier today with a source, and I said, what irony that North Korea could be striking the northwestern states of America, right, Washington and Oregon, with uranium that actually came from that very same area, thanks to the machinations of Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama. Now, I know all this sounds quite sensational, and that's why I'm not Jack Posobiec sitting here and making these claims. I am simply calling for a special prosecution, a special investigation into this entire situation to find out where our government's culpability comes in on it. Because if this is true, and they have secured this uranium, and that there were payoffs to Clinton and to Bill Clinton, to the Clinton Foundation, to so many other people that would have had to be involved in this, with approvals coming all over from Uranium One, lining the pockets of everyone involved in this. While the entire thing was under FBI investigation, the entire investigation then swept under the rug. Mueller goes and invests in hedge funds long after that, long after he gets out of office, where he's getting his profits. We need this to be known. We need this truth to come out. We need all of it to be put in front of the American people to let them know quite specifically what was going on. Remember, Hillary Clinton is worth hundreds of millions of dollars. She's never once had a company. She's never once had, or at least a successful company. She did have Whitewater, I suppose, but we can talk about that some other time. Hillary Clinton didn't sell a product. She didn't provide a service. She was in elected and then later appointed government office. She was in public office and yet ended up a multimillionaire. What product was she selling, you ask? Well, it seems that more and more we're learning that that product may have been uranium.